right. So, so my presentation is Barefoot Dreams of Petra Luna. It's a book that's coming out this September 2021. And it's a middle grade historical fiction, and it's based on my great-grandmother's experience during the Mexican Revolution back in 1913. And it's about Petra Luna, who's a 12-year-old girl and stops at nothing to keep her family safe, her two younger siblings and her grandmother, as they struggle to survive this revolution. And this is the picture of my great-grandmother. She's there at the center, and like I said, she's the one that inspired this. And all her stories that were passed down from generation to generation. And what she talked about was, of course, the Mexican Revolution and having to flee her town with her family. And that's what my book follows, Petra fleeing her village, just being attacked. And Petra's journey, just like my great-grandmother, she had to cross a desert in order to make it to the US border. So she started near the mountains in Coahuila, and they trekked all across the desert. And of course, there's plenty of stuff that happens there. And they made it to a town called Piedras Negras, which is a border town to Eagle Pass, Texas. And in my great-grandmother's story, she said that they all made it to a bridge and that looked like this back in the day in Piedras Negras, the international bridge, but they couldn't get across. And there was hundreds of people there. They couldn't get across because the border was shut. They wouldn't let them through. So she talked about waiting and waiting until finally the Federales, they found out the Federales were on their way, and that's when panic ensued. And she claimed that at one point, when the Federales actually showed up and started wheeling their cannons and aiming it at them, at the crowd, that's when panic broke out and everybody just ran to the bridge and were begging, pleading to get across to have the gates open. And just within a moment, the US soldiers that were guarding it opened the gates and let everybody through. And she always was grateful about that the US government let them in through at the last moment. And this was a story that was passed on, like I said, through generations. And I always wondered if it was true or not. So when I began the story, writing the story, I started searching, and I read every book on the Mexican Revolution out there, possibly. There's about 40 great books out there, but I found nothing on that incident. And I couldn't believe it. So maybe it was, the truth was stretched, maybe it was inaccurate. But this one librarian over at Pikes Peak Library System in Colorado, he was wonderful. His name's Tim Blevins, and he's the one that led me to the research. And he introduced me to this resource here, which it's fabulous. I call it my time machine because it took me to that era. And I started reading every newspaper printed during that decade. And after about 5 months of research, I finally came across this article, which said fearful scenes enacted in flight of refugees from Piedras Negras. And that was it. That's what my great-grandmother had described. It was exactly, except my great-grandmother had said there were hundreds of people, and it was actually 7,000 people that were there at that bridge trying to cross. So first phone call was to my mom to let her know, hey, remember that story? It's real. And then the next one was to Mr. Blevins for thanking him for setting me up with the portal. And later on, once I had the date, I found this wonderful picture that just, it was mesmerizing, but it broke my heart because it showed that moment in time. And you can see the bridge over there that connects both countries. And Piedras Negras is on that side. And you see all these refugees. You see the frightened look in the kids' faces. You see the GIs, just like I said, like my great-grandmother had described it. And just the thought that she could possibly be somewhere in there, it was, it just moved my heart. It was very impactful. And another part of my research was studying the era of that time, the lifestyles, the social climate and whatnot. And this one picture really impacted me because my great-grandmother described just a vast gap between the classes. There's a big divide, and you can see it in this picture. You have these 4 ladies dressed in silks, and you have 2 girls walking in that opposite direction and wearing ragged clothes, and they're both barefoot, which is what my great-grandmother would have been wearing at that time. And I just was so moved by this picture that I had to turn it into a scene. So it's a scene in my book. And you see the face of this one lady here that's tucking in her skirt. I don't know if she's afraid of the girls touching it or something, but you just could see that vast contrast between the classes. And if you'd like to know more about the Mexican Revolution, about my book, I have guides and a timeline, historical note, fact or fiction, when it follows the book. And I'm working on videos right now. I have one here of the resources I use, but I have a couple of videos I'm working on right now that tells children about the Mexican Revolution, and another one about family stories, the importance of seeking family stories. So those should be coming up here. And tomorrow I have my presentation with 3 other fabulous authors. If you want to come and take a look at us, it's for tomorrow at 10:15, and we hope we can see you there. We're going to have a live question and answer. And any questions, if you have any questions you think of at any time, go to my website, aldapdobbs.com, and I have a contact form there, and my email address is there too, my snail mail. So any way you want to contact me, if you want to ask about resources I use, about the book or Mexican Revolution, or just if you want to talk to me about stories, family stories, I'm always interested in those and hearing about them. I've had people approach me about stories they knew about the Mexican Revolution, and it just amazes me just how many lives and the way they were impacted in different ways, coming from all walks of life. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate this.